Hello and welcome to Shape the System, where we find and tell the stories that help people to rethink the way the world works. We interview people from all over the world who are helping to change our systems for the better. Shape the System is an independent podcast with support from KPMG High Growth Ventures, who help ambitious founders and their teams scale up for success. More about KPMG High Growth Ventures after the interview. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hey everyone, hello, welcome back to Shape the System. We're going to be talking about hair. Now, for anyone who isn't on the visual, this is probably the funniest interview I've done over 4 years because I don't have any hair. So for me to have the opportunity to talk about hair and sustainability is kind of this wonderful, fortuitous kind of situation. So firstly, Paul, welcome to the show. And we're actually going to start not in the problem space, which is where we normally start. I want to understand how you, with your full head of hair, arrived to even be working in this space, and then we'll go straight into problem.
Well, first, Vince, thanks for having me on your show. And you do have hair, it's just not on your head.
True.
No, well, look, I can give you a little bit of a history and a backdrop of how I even came into this space of sustainability. But to really kickstart is like, I always tell people I never came from some green world or anything that was like, oh, okay, my parents were these hippies that, drilled it into me and said your future is going to be saving trees and things like that. I did grow up on a farm, though. My grandparents had a rose farm. We were Italian migrants coming to Australia. I was born in Australia, but having Italian migrants, grandparents and parents, they grew up a very different way. They had to survive off the farm. So we were kind of green in that sense and very sustainable to the point of where it was quite annoying as a kid growing up because, your grandparents would literally, they never used the supermarket. Their backyard was the supermarket and, and all your friends are eating Cocoa Pops while I'm having some hippie food from the farm that I could never explain to my friends when I went to school. But that was the reality. We just grew up on the farm. And I always wondered back then, like, gosh, you are very green people. Why don't you vote green? I still remember thinking that being about the age of 11 and 12 when I started to understand politics a little bit. And I started wondering, like, you're very money-focused people, not, sustainable focused. And really back then, when you think about it, they were just focused on, okay, arrive in Australia, how do you make money? We're just going to bring our old trends of Italy to Australia, work the farm. But they never really thought of it as like saving the world. Fast forward to now where we are today, I still feel like I've brought a lot of that with me along my journey because I'm really applying a lot of those similar characteristics where I'm trying to say to people, the way I try to approach sustainability, it's not just about the planet, first of all. It is a big equation to what sustainability is, but you also have to solve the people problem and the profit problem. So people, planet, profit is key along this journey. And if you don't solve that profit issue, and a good example of this is Tesla, right? It's saving the planet, but it's building an awesome product that customers actually want, which is driving huge amount of manufacturing to come back into the country, providing tens of thousands of jobs. This is actually how you build the circular economy in action. This is where you're really seeing probably one of the best examples of sustainability because, again, it's saving the planet, but it's bringing jobs back into the community and driving huge profits, which is, again, allowing all this amazing talent and people to join the company, pay off mortgages, have families, critical along the journey. And I still think a lot back to where my grandfather was. He's like, yeah, we live off this land, but ultimately I have to make money to also pay for this land and make sure my grandchildren have a future too. And I really brought that along my journey.
Yeah. And like good segue. So as a kind of a basis of how you kind of grew up and kind of the values is maybe the wrong word, but maybe principles, probably a better word of how you kind of chose to live, but also can see the world in a way. How did that lead you into what we're going to spend a lot of time talking about today, which is hair?
Oh, look, let me just fast forward then. I went straight into a hairdressing career from a very young age, left school at about 14. I was quite dyslexic, couldn't read very well or write, so I had to leave school or eventually was kicked out of school, you could say. But I had this amazing career in hairdressing. It led me to the Netherlands, where I had about 8 years of my life living there. I met my partner, Evelina. She was studying fashion sustainability. And I'll tell you what, it was that first time when I met her in the kitchen of this, our friend's party, This was when we first met. This is nearly 18 years ago. She started telling me about the fashion industry and where does all these waste material, like how do you basically build a t-shirt? And when you actually look at the supply chain of a t-shirt, you're like, there's so much corruption. There's so much damage to the planet, you could say. You're just like, oh my God, like I can't buy a $5 t-shirt ever again. Like I'm going to actually invest in a t-shirt now, and take that approach. And I started thinking back when I went to the hair salon the next day, well, where does all the hair go? Where does all the metal go? Is anybody actually looking at the waste out of a hair salon? And funny enough, no one was. We're talking about 2005 here. And when you go back to 2005, the word sustainability wasn't even a word really yet. I still remember back then the real hot word was organic or natural. These were the big words. And remember, a lot of our parents were just getting their first probably email addresses at this time.
Right.
so that's 2005.
That's your benchmark for progress. My parents have their email address. Right. Everyone's got an email now. Let's move on to sustainability.
Sure. Well, I always try to put it into that context, right? Because if you go back to the early 2000s, these were not pressing issues yet. People were still focused on, other things happening in the world. The Bush administration was around at that time. So if we can, anyone of our vintage over 40 was like, oh, I remember that time. Yeah, we all hated Bush and hated this and what he was doing. So yeah, it was a different time. But sustainability was, I think the seeds were getting planted. And my partner and I saw that there's going to have to be someone that's going to have to go solve this issue. And especially, she was looking at the fashion industry, but I dragged her into the hairdressing industry and said, I think I've got enough connections in this space where we could probably start to build something. And that's how it all began.
Yeah. And so I want to kind of move from that through to actually, you just touched on it in terms of there's hair waste, metal, I'm assuming it's foils. That's as much as I know about hairdressing. Just help me understand the picture of waste here that's happening inside the salon and then magnify that out either to Australia or even globally.
Yeah, okay. Let me give you some crazy stats then. Because this is how we actually started. When we started Sustainable Salons, or the first part of the journeys, we went and studied the waste of the salon industry. Throw some crazy stats out there. 50% of salons waste is metal, is aluminium pretty much. So aluminium foil and colour tubes makes up 50%. So in Australia alone, we send about 1 million kilos of metal to landfill yearly. New Zealand throws away about 800,000 kilos of metal yearly. Europe, 78 million kilos of aluminium will be dumped annually. And in America, you're looking at about 45 million kilos. So it's massive numbers, right? And if anyone who knows metal, it's infinitely recyclable. It's probably the most sustainable material on the planet, because if you went to all this hard work to dig it up, why the hell are we not keeping it for future generations? Because you can save so much of the energy by actually just recycling it rather than digging it out of the ground. So that's metal. When you look at plastics are a huge waste problem in our industry because we're in the vanity industry, so everything's one use. So when you look at plastics, it's around about 20% of the waste is plastics that come out. Hair makes up about 11%. No one had ever looked at human hair. Hair has always just been like, ugh, it's hair, gross. I always laugh hair because when it's on your head, you love it. Sorry, Vince, not you.
That's so funny. When you see somewhere else?
I'm talking about a normal person. Sorry,
a person with hair on their head. You know what's curious about that? It kind of reminds me. This might sound like a weird parallel, but if you've got a bowl of cereal that you're eating, it seems fine. But if you come across a bowl of cereal that someone else is eating, it seems really gross, and I can never reconcile that. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so hair.
It's the same with hair. When it's on your head, you love it. The minute it comes off, you're like, ooh, ooh, ooh. Yeah. And I'm like, what happened? You love it on your head, but you can't handle a piece of hair on your hand. Yeah. It's a real, it's a funny thing, human hair. It's all perception. But basically, no one had looked at hair. So we thought, you know what? I think it's about time we look at hair and see if there's some solutions to that material. So if I break down the material waste of a hair salon, it's metals, paper, plastic, hair, chemical waste makes up quite a lot. We've also got things like razors and sharps, when we're shaving or cutting the hair for men's hair, using lots of sharps and razors. So that's also a big waste material. So they're pretty much what makes up the salon waste. And honestly, when you actually start breaking it down, you're like, okay, and you separate it into its individual resources. You start to realize, okay, this is doable. These are really good waste materials that actually could easily be recycled, and if not, could go fully circular. So we're like, all right, let's start diving into them.
Yeah, and so because there's some practicalities here that are super interesting, I want to get to the kind of operational challenge of how you even do it. But I'm kind of interested in, the second life that these things have. So metal obviously can be turned back into anything made of that metal, like aluminium, 101 things. The plastics less so. Obviously, plastics generally. We've had a few interesting interviews here. We had the Critical guys, Rory Peng from Critical, and what they're doing with soft plastics, which is freaking awesome. When it comes to these chemicals and also the hair itself, like what are the reuse potentials of these two aspects? Hair especially, I'm super interested in.
Yeah. So we'll even to just quickly touch plastics, you'd be surprised. It's actually a lot easier than you think. And especially when you're targeting one specific industry. So because what makes us unique is we target the same salon all the time, giving us their materials. It's the same material that comes every week, which means we can really start to think about, okay, volume, stockpiling, how do we actually start to use that material for what purpose? Because when you're in the general recycling space, stuff's coming through very messy, very contaminated, very hard to recycle. So it's all about getting highly specific when you're collecting materials. I always call it's like above ground mining. It is above ground mining. We're trying to target the same material over and over again. Now, before I get to then hair, which is always the big hairy stories, I'll just touch on chemicals, like you mentioned it. Chemical recycling has been around for the last, 100 years. The hard part is actually collecting it. And this is where what we are very good at is pretty much reverse logistics. People ask me, well, what is your company actually do? It's reverse logistics. We're very good at how to bring things back because everything goes to businesses, goes to your homes, but very few things come back. And when they do come back, they come back through highly complicated ways of you dropping it off at a facility or trying to give it to this, or just you're putting it in your yellow bin that goes nowhere, or your red bin, which is just a mess. How do you bring back materials clean? So because we bring back the chemicals in a very clean way, well, it's easy. We work with chemical recyclers. They centrifuge it, separate the chemicals from the water. Then the water just gets sold back into the manufacturing markets, such as you could be using that water for your next shampoos. You could be using that water construction. You could be using that water, cement uses a lot of water and so on and so on and so on. So they're constantly buying this bore water, which is basically, it could be. And what's funny, when I ask someone, how much water do you think's in your shampoo? And most people are like, 10%, 20%. I'm like, it's up to 90% water, if not 90. Some of them go up to about 95, 96% water. The chemical component parts that gets added into that to really thicken it up, make it silky, make it smell, all those things, makes up very, very little. So you just got to separate the water. So it's so valuable that we collect that water. So it's not rocket science to recycle chemicals. It's very easy. Collecting it's the hard part. Now let's get on to some hairy stories, because hair is where we kind of really shine because we're solving something that hasn't been solved before.
That's your second hair joke, by the way.
I've got a lot of hairy jokes. I'm the hair man. Everyone's just like, oh, here's the hair man. I've got a big crop of hair and I'm actually solving hair waste. But basically, we just first started off by studying what the hell is human hair. It's really not that weird, because I say to someone, well, what's fur? You wear a fur coat.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, yeah. I'm like, hair is exactly the same. Yes, we're not maybe going to wear hair, or there is actually companies right now trying to produce some high quality fabrics from human hair. It's really not that weird. Hair is just a keratin. It's actually 50% carbon, which is really unique. So when we started studying this, we're like, wow, it's 50% carbon, which opens up a whole Pandora's box, which I'll explain in just a second. It's full of nutrients, proteins, and you're like, wait a second, it's organic. It's anything that's organic actually has a huge purpose back on this planet. So the first thing we said is, okay, what's the first product we can get off the lot, which can really get people excited? And we started hearing about hair cleaning up oil spills and this and that. We're like, all right, has anyone verified this? Is there any science backed on this? Because we're not going to touch it unless we think it's got science-backed data. So we dived in and worked with our first partner at UTS in Sydney, and we figured out hair's a great absorbent. Yeah, actually, making it to clean up oil spills is not a bad idea. We launched the hair boom. A hair boom is a simple 1 meter long sausage filled with human hair. You don't have to do a lot of processing to it, and you can have it deployed on what we call terrestrial oil spills, so on land, not at sea. Quite easy, and off we went. So we started producing hair booms. We partnered up, worked with councils, worked with a few of the cleaning up of the oil spill organizations, and basically started deploying some hair booms. So that was our first big breakthrough.
They're buying those from you? Or?
Oh, yeah. So we sell them at $33 a meter. And well, it's really not that weird because right now, when you buy an oil spill kit, I always say to someone, have a look inside, and what do you see? You see a big long sausage. Well, you will see more hair, definitely, right? because our cost of resource is much lower than everyone else because it's still a waste material. But you basically see a hair, you see a boom, which is made from synthetic plastics. So we're just now got an organic boom, and then you've got a mat, a pair of gloves, and a pair of glasses. So we're really just tapping into the oil spill kit market. And again, they're got to be deployed everywhere because when oil spills happen, car accidents, I'll give you an example of a council. A council at the moment uses them in their water trapments. So when the oil comes out of your home, because you're washing some plates and you've got, all the oils from your detergent, that doesn't get captured normally. So this council now uses our hair booms to capture that oil in their water trapments, and it's really effective. Each boom, just to give you some stats, can hold up to 8. So hair can hold up to 8 times its weight, and it's highly attractive to oil. So it really, when the oil grabs to the hair follicle, it doesn't let go. So you could have that oil sitting in the ocean for years, and that oil will still be stuck to the hair. The ocean water, it's really fascinating. But that's just one. Are you ready for me to really blow your mind? Because
keep going.
We go deep here. So after we did the hair booms, we're like, okay, what's the next big thing we could start to look at with hair? Because hair's going to keep coming. We're only just starting. We've got a lot of hair going to start coming through. So we realized that hair could play a key role in soil. You can't just put hair in compost. It doesn't work. Well, it will break down, but it will take a very long time to break down. So we figured out a way, and we work with a partner. Her name's Jackie. She runs an organization now called Soils Alive, where basically we process the hair, where we get it to her a special way. It's our secret herbs and spices, how we process it, get it to her. She then sends it through a really unique compost process, which releases the nutrients from hair, and then we produce a high-grade fertilizer from human hair. So you can now buy it. It's called Soils Alive. Go and check it out. You can be putting it on any of your plants right now. And who it's really woken up in this space is biodiversity farmers. A lot of the farming industry is going back to biodiversity farming and biodynamic farming. And this is really where they used to use horsehair.
Right.
And I'm like, guys, there's really no difference between human hair and horsehair. It's the same keratin, same carbon. And it's all the same mixture. So, just using human hair could actually help us solve what we're seeing in the farming issue at the moment, which is not enough carbons in our soil.
I was going to ask, could the whole process here, I mean, obviously there's different logistics, apply for animal hair / fur, potentially to produce another?
Mate, we're all over it, Vince. We're now embedded in the grooming space. We're collecting pet fur. So go look at your local groomer. They probably might be already signed up to Sustainable Salons. We're collecting pet fur right across the country. We're going to have some really big players coming on our program next year, and this is going to be huge. So we should be hopefully very soon collecting up to 50% of the nation's pet fur too. So we're going to have all of that hair coming through. And what's the difference? There is no difference.
Yeah.
It's actually softer.
I have a preference for animal fur that's so good. I'm just amazed by the whole idea of it, but also when I thought about the brands, and I like getting back to brand, I was thinking Sustainable Salons, and you think about, some lady going down to Double Bay to get her hair done in foils, but I don't think about pet grooming, and I don't think about a guy shearing his sheep out the back of Canamble somewhere. But realistically, the brand kind of extends to all of the salons, if you think about it.
and you know what's funny is we connect all these people together. So we have the Double Bay hair salons with the Outback salons. We have pet groomers. And it's amazing because I think what really connects all of this is the fascination that we can actually do stuff with all these materials and make them our future resources. People levitate towards it. And can I give you a funny fact? We have more salons signing up to our program way out west than we do in the cities. People think the cities they're more green, they care about this. No. Wait till you go out to Penrith and all these areas. There's highly progressive people now starting to be like, no, I get it. Because we think like a Tesla, we're not saying to you, you're a bad person for not being part of this green revolution. We're actually saying, here's a business model that can actually have you part of the solution. And you know what? It's going to be cost neutral, great for your business, and drive thousands of new customers into your business. You're like, yeah, I'll sign up to this. It's going to make me money. And I always made this joke. Someone said, well, how did you figure out how to even build a pricing model for such a program? And I said, I used to think about my grandfather a lot, thinking, how would I sign my grandfather, someone who really is not a green person, but he just does it on a daily basis? And I always thought the only thing he would say to me is, Paul, I'm going to do my Italian accent. He'd be like, Paul, I want to make a show. I need to make the money. So give me a business that make the money, and I'll be as green as you want. So I thought from the beginning, we better make this a business model that works for the business, and then the most liberal person will sign up and be green. That's it.
What is the business model exactly?
It's simply this. It's basically, so salons sign up to us as a membership. We ask the salons to apply a very small fee to the bill. So it's just like a very small fee that sits on. So let's say you walk into a hair salon and you pay normally $100 for your hair and your haircut and color. In a sustainable salon, it'll be $103. And those $3 is what funds the whole program.
Yeah, wow. Okay, cool. That's so it's fully connected to the customer experience as well. Because part of my questions was, how do you, if you're going to connect it to the consumer and connect it to the, to the salon, and then also to the people who are doing something with the hair and where it's going, it kind of needs to, in some way, relate to the consumer. And then from a kind of economic perspective, from your perspective, that funds the ability for you to have all of the different bins there. There's like 4 different bins from memory, and to get out there and get that stuff, and then obviously make some money on the other side with the raw material. Is that kind of how it connects?
It's exactly right. We have a whole ecosystem that we've built, but if I try to break it down, so yes, we're awesome at recycling. So we collect your materials. It's on demand. We're collecting it straight from your business. So that's where we really shine in the resource recovery, because that's what people can visually see. But let me talk about the other areas where we really shine. The people part is that we've also been able to apply depots in every state of the country. So when we work in Brisbane, we're not sending all those resources to Sydney. We're keeping the depot in Brisbane, the jobs in Brisbane, and we employ 50% of our staff are supported employees, so people with disability, and we're growing that exponentially, providing job security, good wages inside those states. So if you're in, let's say, Brisbane again, you get to hear a Brisbane story supporting it's localism at its best. That's key in sustainability. The next part of this great journey is how we activate a lot of our salons to be part of the community, because sustainability is about activating you inside your local community. So we provide all of these events and services where salons can actually go and cut the hair of the homeless, or provide a dog grooming service to someone in need. And all of these services, which adds a huge amount of personal value of why you sign up to us. Because people are like, I want to be better in my community, I just don't know how. And that's critical along the journey. So salons get excited about that. And then the profit pillar is we've now become the largest directory service in the hair and beauty industry. So we drive more consumers in the salons than any other business in the hair and beauty space. We had, so in the last 3 years, 400,000 consumers go through our directory and book their next hair and beauty or dog grooming service, which has dramatically changed the landscape for why companies now all want to work with us, because they're like, wow, you guys are actually shifting the way consumer behavior is happening. I said, well, we're just creating the gateway for them, because we don't spend any money for that marketing to achieve those. Where like booking platforms and all that, they have an acquisition cost per client. Like it costs us $6 per lead to come through. We don't need to do any of that. Why? Because we're just selling values. People look at us going, that matters to me. I want to go support my local sustainable salon because they're ticking my value set. And that's what's really driving us is consumers today. And I always say, well, why does someone buy a Tesla? Because it's ticking their value set. They've got a waiting list of people trying to buy their cars because it ticks their value set. It's really not the car that they're coming to buy. It's the why.
Yeah. Oh, I would say yes to a point. I think they are like, this aligns to my values, but I also get an amazing product, to your point, at a price point that absolutely makes sense for me. So they kind of tick all 3 boxes. One of the things that's curious to me, and I think of this as kind of a vertically integrated reverse logistics. Is that was the word you used before?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how did you start with it? Because it feels like it's a classic chicken and egg challenge, but you can just start with one salon, and then we use it at our one, and you go to the guy down the street, hey, you should totally do this, and we're just going to drive around to your salon in the back of the VW. Like, how did you manage to break the chicken and egg? How did these parts come together?
It's a really good question. Very rarely I ask this question. And to really answer this is we never intended to be this vertically integrated, doing everything, because we literally control just about everything. We've got the vehicles, we have the depots, it's the whole thing from start to end. But the problem is we're constantly trying to wake people up to be part of our ecosystem. And a good example of that is you talk to Critical. We've got an awesome group here in Australia we work with called Defy Plastics. I still remember meeting them when they were just in a small garage. And what does Defy do? They were like saying, we want to collect waste plastic and make shit, And I'm like, oh my God, you'd be surprised how rare you are, because everyone else just wants to basically pretend to recycle, but is it actually happening? We invested in these smaller companies early on to say, we're going to give you our time, our energy, our marketing, access to our database, so we can start to build products with you, because we want to give you our plastic, we want to make cool shit, and then we want to sell it back into our ecosystem. We don't want to be a plastic recycler. That's what I'm trying to say. But if we're forced into this space, like the hair, like even our depots, like they just didn't exist. I couldn't go into the yellow pages. That sounds pretty old school. I couldn't go to Google and just type in the Italian voice. I couldn't find it. But basically, we had to build it because no one else was. So what we've done essentially now is we built something that now people want to come and attach to our ecosystem. And I use the analogy like Apple. To have a great product, you nearly have to be great at hardware and software. And we really had to do that. If we knew that we were going to build this awesome ecosystem, we kind of had to do both and then merge them together. And that's really what we've got, because we're technically, you could say, we nearly look like a tech company behind the scenes. If you actually look at us, my whole team, there's just lots of techie nerds.
Yeah, well, it's a logistics company, to your point. I mean, this is logistics. There's how do you get the thing here to do a thing with it? And there's a sequencing and there's an order and there's I remember when there was an old case study about Toyota having 26,000 vendors who enable them to make a car. And most of what they did was get really good at the logistics of managing the timing of all of those things, right? Surely that's a big part of it.
And then Tesla comes in and says, wait a second, why don't we just bring this all in-house and we can make it far quicker, better, cheaper, and you get vertically integrated. Because the difference between us and, let's say, a classic recycler is they're coming from the old world back, where we're coming from the new world forward. So our team is trying to come in and solve a problem. We don't want to own depots, if you ask me. Like, hell no. It's a lot of hard work. I don't want to own a fleet. It's a hard thing to do. But if we're going to solve this egg, we're going to have to crack it, right? We're going to have to really get in here and solve this problem. And we're just problem solvers.
I would argue, though, as well, vertical integration is actually not always about owning everything, but controlling the thing to produce the outcome for the specific niche you're focused on.
That's a very good way to say it, yeah.
Yeah, like recycling just seems to be this nebulous thing where everyone's like, hey, there's recycling. You've got one yellow bin and everything that you ever got goes into it, and somehow someone solves that problem. And to say, actually, that's virtually impossible to do. Why don't you get all this type of waste and send all of this type of waste to a single location to do something meaningful with it? It's counterintuitive, but it's kind of obvious when it makes sense when you do it. And the logistics of how you do that is a different challenge, obviously. But once you solve that problem, it's the world's your oyster.
Basically, what you're saying is recycling is prime for disruption. And if I ask this one to you, Vince, where does the yellow bin actually come from? Just to get a bit off track here. Well, it just comes from it comes from the landfill guys.
Right.
No one ever, like, as a hairdresser who look, I've got no fancy degree at university. I just coming in with fresh eyes, and I'm like, so wait a second. The people that we're asking to save the planet are the same people that are digging the biggest holes and dumping it. Why would they care?
Yeah. What's their motivation?
There's zero motivation. The government has just pretty much told them about, 30 odd years ago, guys, we need a recycle bin. Can you guys do it? That's pretty much what happened. And we just subsidized the living hell out of them and gave them tons of taxpayers' dollars to build the crappiest infrastructure. And they love it. Why? Because who's going to argue?
Yeah. I mean, it's all care, no responsibility.
Well, everyone likes to blame the council. Like, the council's recycling. I'm like, it's not the council that does it. They just contract out the landfill guys to do their recycling. No wonder you've got soft plastic is so easy to recycle. All the plastics are easy to recycle. It's just that like you said before, they just developed the one bin model. Dump it all into this one bin and we'll figure it out at the other end. That's the dumbest. That's like saying in the mining industry, okay, why don't you put iron ore with zinc and lithium all in one bin and we'll sort it out in China and separate all the rocks.
Right.
No,
Right.
you're going to collect iron ore in one stream, lithium in another, because this is basically above ground mining. We're just collecting you. So what you should have, so if you go to countries that have really good yellow bin systems, is they have up to 7 or 8 bins. So I just came back from Italy. Italy has 6 bin infrastructures for your home. And they are now the number 1 circular economy country for recycling in Europe. They outpace Germany. The Italians, I couldn't believe it. I was like, my comrades have finally figured out.
But but the joke says, I know they can make high quality, expensive cars, but the Fiat joke.
Yeah. And really, I always said to solve the problem of the recycling industry is just separation at the source.
Yeah. I want to kind of, like, I had one of my questions today thinking maybe there was some specific heuristics that apply to salons and hair care that make it, suitable for this type of vertically integrated approach. Is that a fair statement, or it's like, what, most industries could operate this way? It doesn't just have to be salons.
Nah, salons. The only reason, because where we're performing in salons, is that's my industry. That's my passion. They're my people. I know them. I know the industry, inside out. And beauty and dog grooming just naturally came into our world. But to answer your question, first of all, there is no service, no recycling service for small business in general, period. So if for example, you're a shoe store, what are you meant to have as a recycling service? The yellow bin? Okay, what can you put in it? Cardboard. Can't put any shoes in there. Can't put any rubber. All their waste products can't go in there. So no one's servicing it. They've actually got no service. So a cafe is a perfect one. We got all these cafes. Oh, how do we sign up to this? And I'm like, look, someone's got to go solve it for your industry. But I'd say it like this. First of all, what's the waste stream of a cafe? It doesn't suit a yellow bin. It's 40% organics. You've got lots of cardboard, you've got lots of plastic, but they're very specific plastics, again, for your industry. So basically, you just got to develop the same service for these small industries. And the way I see it in the future is all businesses, all things are just going to get highly specific. Generalism is going to disappear, and we're all going to get highly targeted, because if I build the future product, let's say, which is the hair boom, well, I'm going to target salons and I'm going to make sure it comes uncontaminated to me so I can actually make the product. They're like, I'll give you a good one for cafes. They have a gold mine product that no one's going after, which is called coffee grounds.
Yeah, amazing.
Like, it is like, you could eat this stuff up all day if you're a tomato plant.
I actually literally 2 days ago got on a composting site because I wanted to know if I could recycle instant coffee that hadn't been used. They're like, yes, we added it to our database. So coffee is like an obvious one. I'm curious though, in terms of the thing that part of it that's counterintuitive isn't that if you separate it, and cafes probably have similar types of waste and therefore it lends itself to managing it better, but it's the logistics of saying I can build a network of people and infrastructure to go and get this stuff and bring it back to a location that stacks up because there's enough cafes and there's enough salons either nationally or globally. Is that kind of the right?
Oh, exactly. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Where the true problem lies is probably not so, like, we can get people to separate pretty well if you educate them and all this, but how do you get it financially working for you in a reverse logistics? We're very good at sending things to you, whether you're a home or a business, but coming back is an utter nightmare. Can I just give you some funny things here, right? When we talk with courier companies and logistics companies and this, the minute you say reverse, they're like, I'm out. It's like they tap out because they don't even know how to do it. They suck at, a funny stat, 40% of the world's freight comes back empty. So those container ships that you see, if you ever see these stats, because everything so China sends you all this stuff, but you got nothing to send back. So it's all empty moving containers. So to fill up a container to go back to China is actually dirt cheap. It's nearly free. They're just like free. They're like, great, you're actually going to use it. But yeah, the reality is we're not built for reverse logistics. So if I would inspire someone listening to this to say, be the next Sendle, because Sendle, this great courier company that's going forward, and they're solving the whole tech play at that because again, the courier space is very bad in tech. So we need great tech to now send things to businesses, but start building the reverse logistics now model, because soon everything's going to have to come back.
Yeah, or go somewhere else, to your point.
Yeah, it's good. Well, yeah, exactly. Because if it's my dream in the future, it doesn't even have to come back to our depots. It could go directly to the source that needs it. So can I paint a picture there? Imagine in the future, I could have a salon sending me their metals, not back to me, but directly to the smelter. We've just cut out maybe 2 links of the supply chain issue and been able to now reduce massive amount of carbon emissions because far less trucks on the road, far less movements, doesn't need to go through, 4 touch points to get back to the actual recycler. Because I'm not a recycler. I'm just the guy in the middle that's actually processing and separating those materials. So it's called resource recovery. But getting it to the recycler is not easy. So I want to have things moving very linear now, right to the direct source.
I wouldn't say we should challenge the term circular economy because I think people can understand it. It makes sense. But in a lot of respects, this is a point-to-point problem, right? When a resource is at a place and it needs to be used, it gets sent to the salon. When that thing is broken down into its 3 constituent parts and it needs to be reused, those 3 things need to end up somewhere else. And so much of what you're building ultimately is the infrastructure to manage a point-to-point logistics problem that exists within hair salons, but could just as easily exist within cafes and countless other businesses that have a certain type of waste profile, if you want to call it that, or resource profile. Probably shouldn't even call it waste profile. You might even sell your system to other people who want to go and tackle this in the cafe industry. I mean,
it's exactly right. Well, funny enough, you say that because we've now invested a lot of money and energy and time in building the software. Because there was no off-the-shelf templates, software that we could just jump in and grab. So we've had to build it from scratch. And right now, we have far better software than the courier companies do. So when we plug into our API into their systems, like we're fixing their problem.
Right.
We're like, oh my God, how did a bunch of again, because we're problem solvers, we're like, guys, okay, let's clean out your data. Let's actually make this work. And they're like, wow, yeah, you're right. We're catching them all the time. They're, I'll give you an example, where you get things from the courier and it's like, it's at the depot and then it's in transit and it's all BS, right? They have no idea where their materials and things are half the time. They're just trying to keep you calm and relaxed because I know you wanted your product yesterday. But we actually track everything. So we know where our materials are at any one time, how much is coming in. We're making a tech play at solving this problem. And yeah, you could say in the future, we could white paper our software so other companies could actually just start using it for their reverse logistics.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's an impact leverage play. Obviously, if you've already at 50% mark with Australian salons in those 3 various forms you talked about or getting close to.
And New Zealand.
At some point, and New Zealand, sorry. And you have to kind of think, well, where to from here, right? And obviously a lot of what we're always trying to understand is this will become the status quo, and what stops it from becoming the status quo, just the opportunity to apply it in as many places as possible, either vertically or geographically. For you guys, is that just take this to the US, take this to Europe? Is it a geographic play? How are you thinking about it?
Yeah. We're constantly looking out at the markets and seeing what's out there. We're getting a lot of people coming at us saying, can you come here? Can you come there? And the reason why, if you're a big company today in the beauty space, like they're trying to hit their ESG targets. And without people like us, they're never going to be able to achieve great results. So we're now filling a gap for those cosmetic brands, right? So you're a big brand, you're selling loads of shampoo or cosmetics and things. You're like, wait a second, if we're going to hit circular economy targets, we're going to need people like you to exist. And the big question for those cosmetic brands is, do we actually get in the business of sustainability, or do we start partnering up with people who are really good at it? Because I'm also trying to convince them to get in the business of it. Like people say, like, aren't you taking yourselves out of the equation? I'm like, guys, if one day we solve this problem, I can move on to the next problem to solve. Honestly, this is a big issue in waste, especially for our industry. It's a big industry, the hair and beauty space. So the more, like the way, I go back to an Elon Musk here, he's trying to convince every car company to get involved. He creates open source knowledge, because that's how you have to do this at speed, because we are on a time clock in my space. And it's hard for people to understand this, but when you actually see the data of what's happening to the planet, especially when it comes to our resources and what the future generations are going to have to be left with resources, like we are literally running out of time, and we have run out of time actually years ago in some areas. We're going to basically be leaving our kids and future kids very little to work with to build stuff. And because we're getting very good at incinerating it. And this is, can I just give one shout out to Europe at the moment and America, because it's disgusting to watch. They're claiming these huge sustainability targets. They're just burning it for energy.
Right.
And it's like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in sustainability, because the meaning of sustainability is protecting resources for future generations. Well, if you burn it, well, that's it. You just created. That's one use. It's done. Gone. Okay. There's all. Like I said, what was it? 78 million kilos of foil going to landfill. Oh, now we burn it. But there's zero. They like to claim, but with zero landfill. I'm like, okay, this is you guys went to university, right?
Do you have these arguments?
Oh yeah,
like,
yeah. And I don't hold back. Anyone who knows me in a meeting, I'm going to show you how a guy with a hairdressing degree is going to laugh in your face about your knowledge set, because you are the dumbest people I've ever met, putting together some of the policies that actually are claiming absolute rubbish, because it is rubbish. They're putting rubbish out there, and because they're all trying to chase being carbon neutral, and they're so desperate they'll do anything to get there. It's big money at play here, big multinationals. I say from a multinational that their whole business structure it's like a car company. Let's say Volkswagen, right? It's easy in the car industry now because we have Tesla, but if you look at a car industry, you're like, your whole company was built to build a combustion engine. And if you say to them, hey, you got to build electric, well, they've got to change 50% of their employees. They've got to change the way the factories are. Like, there's a huge shift that needs to happen. That can take decades. It's like shifting the Vatican, right? It's going to take a long time. And that's where they're not in a great position, and they know it. So they're going to try to slow things down as much as they can to try to catch up at the back end and build out the infrastructure. And that's why you're going to see Chinese EVs and Teslas just taking off, because they started in a different position. So I'm really trying to tell these big multinationals, you really need to make your play now, or consumers aren't going to buy your product.
And then
they're just not.
Like, yeah, and then you in how that might play out practically, do you see, I only know Heads and Shoulders, that's the only shampoo brand I'm aware of.
I'm surprised you were shampoo.
It's been a while. And Schwarzkopf, I'm aware of that one too. I don't know how to say it properly, but I'm aware of that one. Do you see them playing a role in basically saying we're going to start developing product off these raw materials? Is that how you think that this will play out with these large brands? Or
I hope they can start to see future down this path. And to just answer that question, it doesn't mean you have to. The way I approach any company is like, to understand sustainability is you've got to get back to the customer experience and what is it they're actually asking for. You're sending one use out into the stream, but are they really? Does the customer really care about that? No, actually, the customer is just wanting a great product that performs well. So how you deliver the product actually comes back to the design of the product. First of all, making it very easy to recycle should be always on your list, but maybe redesigning. You can see a huge movement now in refills, and people are actually willing to actually just have a refill put back in, or bring your bottle back. So we can actually, you don't have to have more waste coming into the stream. What they've built is a globalization product where you've got one factory that can literally sell from that one factory to the whole world. You're going to have to change that model. That model is dying because people don't want to be part of globalization. They want localization to come back. They want jobs back in the community. So you just got to start thinking differently about how you're actually delivering the product of the future. And what's stopping you from actually, you're very good at taking it to them. What's stopping you from starting to take back your waste materials? You know who's getting really good at this? Apple. They're like, wait a second, there's high value in an Apple phone. Why wouldn't we take it back?
Yeah. And offer you $49 for it.
Right. Well, that first it started off giving it to us for free. Now, like, we'll actually pay you for it. Why? Because for us to go and mine that and secure all these mines around the world is actually very bad political play, very bad for their long-term governance. It's far easier to just get much better customer experience from the customer, bring it back, and we get back our gold, our silver, our coppers, all out of our phones again, which are infinitely recyclable materials, right? It's actually great for customer experience, great for future profits. Like, that's the way I try to talk to companies. You actually got to rethink, what is it you're delivering? You're just so linear right now. Like, well, the way you're thinking is just so 1980s, it's dead.
I want to come back to one thing that we kind of touched on earlier, but also, and we'll probably close here as well. I'm mindful that you've got to jump into something else, but I've kind of been thinking about this just while you've been talking about this bigger picture and this bigger opportunity. I've interviewed probably 80 people on this show over the last 4 years. And whilst a lot of them are very progressive in their thinking and are really innovative in their thinking, very few of them, maybe other than the guys over at Heaps Normal, thought a lot about their brand. But when I look at your company and your brand, it's clear that a lot of thought's gone into the way this whole narrative is being shaped and how you show up in the universe. I'm curious about that, but I also am interested in the role that plays in the bigger mission that you're trying to do, and we'll see if we can get through that in a few minutes.
Yeah, look, just really high level, yeah, my partner and I, we care deeply about the customer journey and customer experience. And very few people I notice along their journeys do. They're very focused on how to get their product as cheap as possible, maximize their profits, and just, do the traditional business play, where we think a little bit, like I said, more like a tech company, and we're solving a problem. So what's the customer experience going to be like? And that's why the brand has evolved to what it is. And today, we actually, even though the customer is still the hair salon, our true customer is actually the consumer going to get their hair cut. So we realized very much, and this was in our last brand refresh, is how much we got to be dedicated to now thinking about the customer experience and why you choose a sustainable salon of the future. And that has really changed the way we look and feel. And our, I think, secret sauce down this path is we keep a very strong connection to the salon itself and make sure that we're feeling their needs, such as their staff needs, education needs. How do we keep constantly educating the staff? Because you've got new hairdressers coming in all the time, new dog groomers. You got, as any small business, you're highly erratic. We just say, stop. We take over. We're your sustainability partner. We're going to track who's the people in your business. And this is good for our business too, right? We track who they are. We want to educate them correctly. You're literally got education on tap. And this is not just digital education, physical education. I say investing in that physical education is key. And one of the greatest, I think, moves we made is very early on is we plugged ourselves into the curriculum. We just you go to TAFE now and you want to study sustainability, you're going to study us.
Really?
Yeah. And it's because I said to government and private educators down this path is show me anyone who's doing it better than us. Because right now what you're teaching them is basically ridiculous. They're disinterested. It's boring. So when you go study sustainability, it is so boring. It's like, if I want to teach it, show them a documentary about how we turned hair into a hair boom. They're like, sign me up. Right? That's what gets us excited about sustainability. Right. So we built a gamified experience of how to actually educate you in sustainability. And that gets people inspired. And if you can get someone inspired, they're going to want to know more.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that was kind of reminiscent for me, we spoke to Ronnie Khan over at Oz Harvest, and so much of what they're doing isn't just the logistics of getting food from a shop that doesn't need it and giving it to someone, although that's a big part of it. It's this whole advocacy piece of actually changing the relationship that we have with food in her position. And I kind of feel a lot of that vibe coming from you in terms of how you're thinking about this. And I kind of use brand as a shorthand for there's a larger advocacy and education piece that's happening here. And whether or not you sign up to a sustainable salon, because you're operating in France where you guys don't operate yet, a whole group of people are going to be able to feel differently about it or be inspired to set up one in their local environment, which is just shaping the system right down to a T.
Oh, you're spot on. And funny because we're huge fans of Oz Harvest. It's we've been supporting them from day dot with, I think, just under 400,000 meals now provided through our program. Because we actually sell the metal, we sell the foil. 100% of our proceeds go to Oz Harvest and Kiwi Harvest. So that's where we like to demonstrate the value of recycling. But what's really fascinating with her business model is actually very similar to ours. She's reverse logistics.
Exactly.
And if you go ask Ronnie, because I know Ronnie well, is we've had to do that. She had to be a vertically integrated mom, like nearly to the point where she might as well just start growing the food. It would be easier to actually set up a farm than it would be to try to get the food back from the supermarkets, right? But she's exactly in our same position. And they actually have a very similar layout of depots all across each state, vehicles coming back every day, bringing back the materials. It's very similar.
Yeah, I love it. Oh, that's all we've got time for today, Paul, I reckon, with both of our competing schedules. But it was an absolute pleasure to talk about hair that I don't have and hair that you know a lot about. So thank you for being on the show and sharing all that with us.
Thanks for having me, Vince. It's been a real pleasure.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Shape the System. As usual, if you'd like to suggest a guest, someone that you know who's helped change a system for the better, please go to www.shapethesystem.org, click on the top right-hand corner, then click Suggest Guest. Make sure that you click subscribe so that you get the new episode. Shape the System is an independent podcast with support from KPMG High Growth Ventures. Connects founders to the services they need along their journey. Whether you are looking to refine your strategy, mature your finance function, prepare for a capital raise, expand abroad, or simply comply with regulatory requirements, they provide you with the support you need to drive your business forward.